Thank you, Senator Lee, and thank you all for being here on this very important topic. I'd like to ask the other two witnesses today, Professor Rose and Ms. Slayman, whether you have a preliminary opinion on the merger guidelines that have just been issued.
So, like Mr. Dellerham, I have not had time to digest the what is a quite lengthy document, especially if you go to the appendices. I do think this approach of trying to lay out in terms that are easier to understand the various theories of harm and concerns that mergers might raise should be of enormous support for courts that are struggling with some of these issues, often with judges who have never had an antitrust case before a merger case from the DOJ or FTC lands on their docket. So I think that that's helpful. In the context of specifically of the vertical provisions, I've had a chance to look through quickly sections 5 and 6, which are really the core areas that kind of articulate the potential problems with vertical mergers. I think they're quite clear with respect to this discussion about double marginalization and efficiencies. I think these guidelines take a balanced approach to them, which is to say, you know, just as parties will always assert in horizontal mergers that the merger is going to create efficiencies. I've yet, at least when I was there, yet to hear one where that wasn't an argument. And the agencies are appropriately skeptical and ask the parties to really push them hard to support that with evidence. I think these also take that view with some of the vertical efficiencies that are claimed, and I think that's appropriate. You know, to go back to, we keep talking about AT&T Time Warner, but you know, that was something where the Department of Justice credited the EDM. The court then said, well, you know, the profit maximization that gives you with this integrated entity, the elimination of double marginalization, we think that will happen, but we don't think the profit maximization that's exactly the same process that creates the raising rivals cost and foreclosure concerns, you know, I don't think that's going to happen because these executives said, oh, we'd never maximize profits that way. You know, that tension is fundamental in evaluating a vertical merger. I think it's important that the guidelines, I think, are trying to explain to courts some of that.
Ms. Slayman?
Thank you. I wanted to respond in particular to Mr. Delrahim's comments about referring to old case law. I think that case law is still good case law. That's still good law. What the goal of guidelines, I think, always is to merge the law with the up-to-date economics. One of the problems that we face in antitrust law is that old economics is getting enshrined in case law, and I think that is not how antitrust law is supposed to function. We're supposed to be using the most up-to-date economics and merging that with prior judicial decisions. So that's what these guidelines are doing, and I think that's exactly right. That's what we need. So I was very glad to see that perspective in the guidelines.
Good point. Mr. Delrahim, welcome back to the committee.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for your service. In 2019, I think, as you know, the Department of Justice said about the consent decree on Live Nation and Ticketmaster, and I'm quoting, Live Nation repeatedly and over the course of several years engaged in conduct that, in the department's view, violated the final judgment, end quote. I know Senator Klobuchar has asked you about Ticketmaster, Live Nation, coming right to the point. The Department of Justice reportedly has an investigation underway about the potential violations of the consent decree. Assuming that it finds there has been yet again, I think it's the third time, a violation of that consent decree, isn't it time to break up that merger, to roll it back, to admit it ain't working out for consumers, as I think most consumers will tell you in very graphic terms. Talking about remedies, wouldn't, in effect, breaking up the merger now be the right remedy?
As you noted, that enforcement action was during my tenure, and I was personally involved. I've been advised by the department's ethics officials to not speak publicly about the matter while it's still pending. I can't even use it in my class at the University of Pennsylvania.
Even though we're 4 years later?
Until they tell me, okay, I will. That's one area of the law that I don't want to violate.
Okay. Professor Rose, Ms. Slayman, maybe you can comment.
I'd be happy to weigh in on that. I think that what we have learned over 40 years of vertical merger enforcement through consent decrees that are almost always behavioral remedies is that they don't work. As has been alluded to, the courts are not regulators, the enforcement agencies are not regulators, and the companies understand when they're negotiating those decrees sort of what they can agree to that will still preserve their ability to exercise the market power that was often the target of that vertical merger, the goal of that merger. So I would have to say, I think if you want to remedy this problem in this particular context, that probably divestiture is the only solution that will give you a lasting remedy to it.
Ms. Slayman?
Well, I'd like to speak more generally about the idea of behavioral remedies, because I absolutely agree with many of the criticisms that we've heard today of behavioral remedies. They are frequently not enforced well. They are frequently time limited for too short a time limit. But I am hopeful that we can set to improving our system of behavioral remedies, because I think there are times when behavioral remedies can be an important solution. We talked about the resource constraints that the agencies are facing today, so I think there may be times when settlement is necessary, and it would be great if we had a better system of behavioral conditions that could actually be enforced quickly and effectively. So I think we should work to improve behavioral conditions.
I'm not going to ask you the next question, which is tell me a behavioral remedy that has worked. Tell me a consent decree that has been effective. I'm going to give you a little time to think about it, mainly because my time has expired. It certainly hasn't worked for Live Nation Ticketmaster.
Absolutely.
And it's made a mockery of the idea of consent remedies. They've run circles around the enforcers. They've deluded the public, and I don't want to prejudge the result of the Department of Justice investigation, but if it does what it should do, then I think that some structural remedy here is absolutely appropriate. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you.